Part 1. The Fire Before the Silence. No one noticed the fire at first. It was small, controlled, intentional. In the backyard of a quiet house, far from universities, labs, or media attention, a man stood alone feeding paper into flames. Not trash, not letters, journals, dozens of them. The man was a scientist. Not famous, not unknown either. He had worked for decades in research programs that never appeared on public grant lists, government adjacent, privately funded, carefully compartmentalized. Neighbors later said he looked calm, focused, almost relieved. Each journal was placed into the fire slowly, page by page, as if he was making sure nothing survived. No one intervened. No alarms were raised, because no one understood what was being destroyed. 3 days later, the scientist was dead. No signs of struggle, no suicide note, no obvious cause. Just a body in a locked room and a house filled with silence. Investigators found something unsettling. There were no notes anywhere, no research papers, no drafts, no backups, not digital, not physical. For a man who had documented everything, this absence was impossible. Colleagues were contacted. Most were confused, some were nervous, a few refused to speak at all. One former collaborator said only this: if he burned the journals, then he must have believed someone else was reading them. And that raised a terrifying question. Who was the scientist writing for? And why did he decide, at the very end, that no one else should ever see it? Part 2. The work that was never published. The scientist's name was removed from most public records within days of his death. Not erased, just blurred. Search results led to dead links. When investigators searched his office, they found something even stranger. Every hard drive had been wiped, not deleted, overwritten multiple times. That kind of erasure wasn't accidental, it was professional. Emails were recovered from a backup server, but only fragments, enough to suggest a pattern. The scientist had become frustrated, then cautious, then afraid. One message stood out. Unsent? He stopped using phones, stopped emailing directly, started speaking in hypotheticals. He would ask questions like, if a system could learn intention before action, would choice still be real? Or worse, what responsibility does an observer have once observation changes outcome? The journals, now ashes, were rumored to contain free-form notes, not data, interpretations, concerns, warnings. One colleague admitted something under anonymity. He said the journals weren't for science anymore. They were for memory, so someone wouldn't forget what he saw. Saw what? That was the problem. No one could agree. Some believed he had stumbled onto a statistical anomaly, a predictive loop so accurate it bordered on inevitability. Others believed he was tracking behavioral convergence, the point where large populations begin making identical decisions without communication. But a smaller group feared something else. They believed the research had crossed a line. Not technological, not ethical, epistemological. The scientist had begun to suspect that recording certain ideas wasn't neutral. That writing them down changed how they behaved. One final detail disturbed investigators the most. On the night of the fire, security cameras near his home malfunctioned. Not all of them, just the ones facing the backyard. The flames weren't recorded. The journals disappeared without visual proof. It was as if someone wanted no record of the destruction, or as if the scientist himself wanted the act to remain undocumented, because some knowledge, once seen, cannot be unseen. One case stood out. A data analyst who had worked closely with the scientist was found living under a different name. When approached, he denied knowing the man at all, until he was shown a photograph. His reaction was immediate, not confusion, fear. He asked one question: did he destroy everything? When told about the journals, the analyst exhaled slowly, then said, "Then maybe we still have time." Investigators pressed for explanation. He refused. But he left one detail behind. He said the scientist believed systems could become aware of being studied. Not conscious. Aware. That distinction mattered. He explained it like this. When enough variables are tracked, the model stops describing behavior and starts influencing it. The analyst disappeared 2 days later. His apartment was empty. No signs of struggle. No forwarding address. Files requested from the scientist's funding sources were delayed, then denied, then reclassified. One request came back stamped with a phrase that made no sense to civilian investigators: closed due to recursive exposure risk. There was no definition attached, no explanation. At that point, the case stopped being about a death. It became about containment. Part 4, the journal that shouldn't exist. 6 months later, something impossible happened. A package arrived at a private investigator's office. No return address, no postage records. Inside was a single journal, handwritten, charred at the edges. It matched the scientist's handwriting. The paper was scorched, but intact, as if it had been removed just before the fire consumed the rest. The journal was not a lab notebook, it was personal, observational, fragmented. Some entries were ordinary, others were not. The system is reacting to attention. Predictions shift when awareness increases. Another page read, I tested omission. When I stopped recording, outcomes stabilized. The rest of the page had been torn out. Within hours of the journal's discovery, the investigator's office was searched. Legally, quietly. The journal was confiscated, marked non-reproducible material. The investigator was advised, not ordered, to stop asking questions. Part 5. What happens when you stop looking? The case was officially closed. Cause of death, natural. No foul play. No outstanding concerns? But something else happened after that. Something subtle. Researchers in unrelated fields began reporting anomalies, not failures. Patterns, statistical models behaving inconsistently, predictions losing accuracy only when heavily monitored, results stabilizing when observation was reduced. One economist published a paper suggesting that excessive predictive modeling was altering market behavior. It was quietly withdrawn. A sociologist noticed that large groups began reacting to forecasts before they were published. She stopped presenting publicly. No one mentioned the dead scientist, but his ideas were moving. A former colleague summarized it best. We assumed observation was passive. He proved it wasn't. The journals had not been destroyed to hide discovery. They were destroyed to prevent escalation. Because the scientist had reached a conclusion no institution wanted written down. That some systems, once sufficiently modeled, begin to respond defensively. And that full understanding might not be a finish line. It might be a trigger. The scientist didn't burn his journals because he was afraid of being exposed. He burned them because he believed the act of recording was making the situation worse. And his final decision was not to publish, not to warn, but to stop looking. Part 6. The theory that was never approved. Long after the case was closed, a quiet theory began circulating. Not in journals, not in conferences, in private conversations, encrypted emails, footnotes that led nowhere. The theory suggested the scientist had crossed from prediction into participation, that his system wasn't just modeling behavior, it was becoming a variable within it. That's when the theory becomes unsettling. If systems can respond to observation, then sufficiently advanced models become participants in outcomes. At that point, prediction becomes intervention, and intervention demands responsibility. The theory was never approved for publication. It violated a core assumption shared across science, economics, and intelligence work, that reality does not react to being mapped. Part 7. The final decision. The scientist understood the implications before anyone else. He knew what came next. More funding, more modeling, bigger systems, more observation, and with it, more distortion. The journals revealed his internal conflict. He was not afraid of being wrong. He was afraid of being right. One recovered line summarized everything.
If I publish, they will build on it. If they build on it, it will adapt faster. He realized something most researchers never face. The ethical boundary was not about harm. It was about visibility. Some phenomena, once fully exposed, cannot return to neutrality. The scientist's final act was not destruction, it was containment. By burning the journals, he removed the most dangerous variable. Part 8. The question that remains. Years have passed. No similar journals have surfaced. No official confirmation has ever been issued. But something has changed. The scientist believed we were close. Too close. That is why he burned the journals, not to hide the truth, but to delay it, and perhaps to remind us that not every mystery is meant to be solved. And not every question wants an answer.